Gabriela, welcome to Becoming Okay. How are you doing today, lovely?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me, Meg.
It's so lovely to see you. I keep forgetting as I'm like literally about to dig into my first morning coffee how late it is for you over there. So I appreciate you checking in and we can't wait to have you back in the UK very soon.
I'm so excited. We're going to be back in a month and really looking forward to getting back into the UK.
Yeah, hopefully the sun will come out for you because you'll be craving it desperately after that Australian sun. We
Well,
um we jumped on when we first spoke. There was something that I really wanted to just pick your brain on first and foremost today, because something I've been diving deep into is the inflammations within our body and what that's telling us about the symptoms and how that leads to X, Y, Z. I've spoken about it a lot online. I'm coming off antidepressants, so it's like a big topic of mine at the moment that I'm learning about and throwing myself into, I should say. And I remember you saying to me that you were paying attention to the information in your body and what it was teaching you about how you carry stress and when and how it demands change in your life. And I know it's been a big part of you finding yourself over the last year, moving to Australia, etc. So can you just share for me, like, how did you learn about inflammation? Like, how do you know what it's telling you? How do you know the signs? Like, what was going on
yeah.
for you in that moment?
It's interesting because I think inflammation is a word that we hear a lot and we see it
Hmm.
online. We hear people talking about it, but then sometimes fail to think about what does that actually look like for me? And what are the symptoms in my body that could be representative of inflammation? And so when I was experiencing, kind of in that really deep place of burnout and trying to just simplistically look at my body and go, what is different today and how I'm feeling versus when I know I've been livelier or when I have felt more energetic. And I think what I can kind of go into what that looked like, but at a high level, what paying attention to inflammation has really showed me is that our bodies are far more patient than we give it credit for, but our bodies are not endlessly negotiable. And I acknowledged that I'd been living with probably low grade stress and the inflammation that's come from it for years. And I had normalized my exhaustion. And I had largely told myself that all of the symptoms I was experiencing from headaches every single day, from insomnia, from panic attacks in the office, at my job, regardless of all of that, I would tell myself that I was fine because I was functional. I was productive at work. I got promoted twice within periods of where I was at my worst period of burnout. And what's fascinating is that because of the kind of external success that I was seeing at work and just in my personal life, I never really had a wake up moment that I needed to change. And it wasn't until, and we can kind of go into some of the more specific points in my life where my eyes just were so opened, but it wasn't until my body started really throwing aggressive somatic signals at me where my hair started falling out and my panic attacks were becoming much more regular. 2, 3, I'm pretty sure there was a day where I had 4 in the span of being in my office from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it really showed me that my body was starting to wave flags where burnout was actually not the injury. Burnout was the symptoms. It was the signal of the injury that was to come. And so when I think about, to kind of summarize that, um, what inflammation really represented for me, it was learning that my body can actually handle a lot. And it was going, just because it can handle a lot and my body is sending me these signals does not mean that I actually should accept it. And something about that needs to change.
One of the things I'd really love to step into myself more is how we have conversations about mental health in the workplace, just because, like I shared about it online the other day, I'm guilty of it. I don't ever, when I was employed, I never called in and said, I need a mental health day. I'd call in and say, I'm sick, I'm not well, etc. And you hide behind this mask because bringing up the mental health card in the workplace feels like walking on eggshells. And it's like, how are people going to treat me? They're not going to think I'm capable enough just because I've had a bad day, and that will be remembered longer than me having a sick day.
Yeah.
And when you're telling me that you're literally having panic attacks in the workplace, how did you get through that? Like, what are you doing in that
Yep.
moment?
Yeah.
That must have been
It
like just awful.
it was, and I worked in a very high intensity tech environment where I
Mm,
very much felt that exactly as you've said it, like if I come out of the bathroom right now and I go to my boss or even I go to someone on my team and say, I've just had a panic attack, I actually can't go to that meeting that's starting in 3
yeah.
minutes. I need a breather. My head would default into, well, your breathing has semi-regulated again and you're not hyperventilating anymore. So actually, you can go to that meeting and it's better that you just do it.
Yeah.
And I remember having that internal conversation with myself so many times. And I actually had a moment trying to remember exactly like what was happening on the day, but one of my coworkers, I think I was late actually to a meeting and someone probably went to go find me because ordinarily she would have not come looking for me, but I was late enough to a meeting because I was hiding somewhere in some hallway trying to breathe and regulate and get myself back in to kind of a state where I could work. And it wasn't until someone saw me where I was like, I'm hiding I'm hiding myself right now. There is something going on with my body, with my mind that now that someone else has seen it, as confronting as that was, it actually needed to happen because it was the moment that her reaction, she was like, "W- you don't need to go to like home now, like out of the office." And it took someone else finding me in that kind of rock bottom moment where I was like, oh, it's okay to be vulnerable. And actually, I don't need to hide this. Now, of course, that didn't happen overnight. And it took a lot of work where I could actually admit that, okay, I'm not having a strong mental health day. And words were the most powerful thing. I really had to get comfortable with myself because my burnout had taken such a hit on me emotionally, spiritually, mentally. I was not, even though it looked like I was performing, my body was so close to shutting down that I had to start getting familiar with the language of saying, I'm not okay right now. I started telling someone if I had a panic attack. I had an emoji. The colleague who found me, I would send her a specific emoji if I was having a panic attack in the office. It was a no spoken thing at first, and that's how I eased myself in. And she was my partner in crime. We went to almost every meeting together, every project together. There was very little that we did apart. So she was very conscious of my movements in and around the office. I'd send that emoji, and she was like, understood, got it. And as time went on, I started feeling more comfortable with saying, this is where I'm at. I can't come in today. But it probably took me the better part of 6 months before I ever felt comfortable attributing what was going on to mental health. And to your point, not just saying, oh, I'm feeling sick today.
Mm,
And that change in language was so important because I noticed very quickly other people around me starting to use the same kind of language and actually become more vulnerable with where they're at. And even in the little micro culture of my team, within a few months, we all just built so much appreciation and compassion for each other because everyone was going through this. It was not an isolated experience, but all of us never knew what was going on with everyone else. So I think the thing for me here and like the piece of advice that I give to other people in this scenario is the scariest word or the scariest phrase, if that is saying the word panic attack out loud, if it's saying my mental health is not in a good place, say it once and see the reaction of people around you. Not everyone's going to react well. It's the reality of the situation because some
yeah.
people don't have the language to help you. But the more you can build confidence with it, the more that you can actually feel empowered in it's okay for me to not have to have everything together and present or mask that everything is together. It took so much pressure off the situation. And that's actually then what led me to be so much more vocal about the healing process I went through.
I want to ask you about your healing process in a second, but I've heard you use the term burnout so much, and I've got to ask you how you feel about that term now, because during that time when you were going through those motions, it was a really great way to explain in the workplace, I'm under a lot of pressure and stress and I'm not handling it well. I'm starting to burn out. I feel like it's thrown around so much now that it's lost its value a little bit. It's become a bit of a buzzword. And it's frustrating because I do think when people hear the word burnout now, people start to roll their eyes. Like it's just another
Mhm.
label for it. And it's frustrating, like I say, because it's become an easy way to, or a more accepted and universally understood term in the workplace that is slowly losing its credit. I feel a
Yeah.
little bit. I wonder how you feel about it.
I think it's interesting that it is so widely used at this point, because my question is that an environmental situation in which the way in which we're expected to work in this day and age, or the way in which we're expected to keep up socially, professionally, personally, like, are those pressures there that everyone is being sent into this kind of energetic deficit? Or to your point, is it just a word that we now are casually throwing around, and anyone who's experiencing poor mental health or just got a really nasty Slack message from their boss is just going, okay, well, now I'm burnt out? There is a clinical definition of burnout. There are symptoms that medical professionals can explain to someone and diagnose if something is truly burnout. When I use the word burnout, to me, it was a time at which I lacked the energy to move through my day in a way that met my basic needs. I was unable to feed myself in a way that was going to give myself the nutrients I needed to get out of bed and go to work and be a mom to my dog, right? Basic things that I needed to get through. I lacked the energy to even do it. It was challenges even getting dressed in the morning. One of the things I talk about that actually landed me in a BuzzFeed article, which is so funny in retrospect, is I talked about how I wore the same outfit for probably 150 days in a row. Same pair of jeans, same t-shirt, same pair of shoes. I took the thinking out of it. I had the same pair of those items of clothes, copy and pasted. If you've ever seen an episode of SpongeBob, it's like when he opens his closet and there's just the same outfit on 5 different hangers. That was me. And
Wow.
I think people right now might use the word burnout and it might just be like, I'm really going through it at work, but energetically, from a body systems functioning perspective, they're moving through their day. Whereas when I'm using it, I'm really talking about, I did not have the energy, I did not have the reserves to operate in a way that I would consider my baseline. And after so many days and months of it, it was really starting to take an impact how I showed up in my relationships, the ability for me to go to work. I could prove I could push through it, but the wheels were starting to come off. And as I said, that was the warning before the bigger injury.
I know for you, change in environment was a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I felt it myself when I went to South Africa last year. And I feel it all the time when I'm having a bad day or a bad moment, that the environment you're in encapsulates all of those bad emotions and that buildup of stress.
Yeah.
If your environment is your workplace, that a lot of your stress is tied to, but it's also going to cause a lot of other stresses on top of that, because like if our answer to burnout is change the environment and yours was a work environment, and so someone says leave the place of work you're in, surely you're going to burn out in other areas now, because you're going to start stressing and spiraling over things like finances, like your home life, your routine. So as much as I know for you that was a big pivotal moment in your career that you had to change, is that the only way we get through this? Is it to change the environment, escape where the problem is occurring frequently? Or is that running from it? I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I know it's a big question.
It's a huge question, and it's a really good one. I think, there's a huge body of evidence from environmental psychology that has proven how influential our surroundings are on our nervous system. And for me, really removing myself from that specific workplace, it wasn't necessarily about running away, but it was more about interrupting patterns that I couldn't see clearly from the inside anymore. And what I mean by that is just ways that I was existing in that office. For example, there was a big culture, right, of sitting at your desk and actually like not being super collaborative. And in retrospect, what I see so much is that in my kind of recovery process from burnout, I needed additional socialization that I just was not getting in the office because that was a cultural thing. And actually, when I removed myself and after work, even before I'd left the job, I started really putting myself into environments where I was just going to be around other people, regardless of how much my body was saying, go home, sit in your bed. I knew that I needed socialization. So, what's important, I think, and I'll come back to your question of like how some of us just can't walk away from the office because it provides other needs. So, I'm going to come back to that. But new places create what's called a contextual break. And a contextual break, very much as you've just described almost with your trip to South Africa, is it loosens our identity a little bit. And I think a lot of why we struggle if someone's experiencing impact on their mental health as a result of their job that they're in, it's because so much of that job is tied to our identity. We are our job titles. We do work for this company. It's how we introduce ourselves. And when you don't have that to fall back on, it can feel equally destabilizing. So what's nice about a contextual break and kind of that loosening of identity is that you start just seeing yourself as a human somewhere else, which I know you're like, well, yes, because I'm physically in South Africa or I'm in a different country, but it just creates temporary distance between you, the identity that you have in that office, the identity of you working for that company, and it gives you that break. When you're routinely in those spaces, your body is being reminded of who it had to be to survive there. And then a lot of those perfectionist tendencies or all or nothing tendencies or prove yourself tendencies, it's autopilot. You don't know how to exist in those spaces without doing it. It's really hard if you've been a top performer who says yes to everything to show up the next day and go, oh, I just say no to every request now. It's really hard to do that, right? So changing environments gives you space. And for me, it was a required input for this. Now, I didn't just cold turkey leave the job. There were a lot of things that I did to try and remedy the environment that I was in. And I think when we look at the world of decision fatigue and burnout and the impact that that can have on our mental health, a lot of the advice that we get is to add more to our plate. Try this, try breath work. Have you gone to yoga? Are you journaling? Right? There's all this kind of conventional advice. And actually, if you think about what's already on your plate, if you think about that as mental load, adding is just consuming that already finite amount of energy that we have. So when I'm working with people, especially who are on the career evolution process, who are thinking about, okay, where I'm at right now is having a negative impact on my mental health. I know that there's something else out there professionally for me. How do I start thinking about that without quitting my job in 2 hours and then just running at the next thing? And I love this activity of empty the cup. And it really is looking at what is in demand of your time, energy, attention, focus right now. And maybe you just think about that for tomorrow. Look at your meetings. Who's going to be messaging you on Slack? What is happening socially? Like, just really map that out and think about everything in a 10-day period. And I want you to look at what is required of your energy, attention, focus, and go, if I didn't get this thing done in the next 10 days, I'm not talking about day 11, just the next 10 days, what is actually going to happen? And I run this activity with people, and 9 times out of 10, everything's urgent. They're like, if I don't do it, the company's going to close down. That's our gut response, right? Because when we're in that state of burnout or energetic deficit, we're just operating from a fear-based mindset. The part of our brain that helps us make decisions rationalizes it's offline, and that is biological, and that's actually really healthy. If you are experiencing burnout and you cannot make a decision to save your life, that is healthy. Your brain is working. Your brain is intended to shut off like that if you have been under incredible amounts of stress for a prolonged period of time. I will challenge everyone on those. Is it really urgent? Tell me why. And I'll ask why 5 times. And I promise you, you get to the end of that list and maybe there's one thing on there that actually needs your attention over the next 10 days. And I work on giving people essentially a permission letter to themselves of going, those other 9 things that I said were urgent or that I had worked up so much in my mind, I'm giving myself permission for the next 10 days back burner. Doesn't matter. It might mean that your teammates notice a slight drop in performance. Okay. But we sometimes have to take temporary measures to just pull the brakes or push the brakes, put on the brakes, whatever the expression is, to create more time where our brain is just not overloaded. So I know that was a really long example, but I invite people to test that empty the cup approach to create short to medium term space between them and the things that are immediately causing the stress within the workplace. But you can also run that exercise at home if that's where a lot of the stress is coming from. So it's really whatever environment is contributing, or environments, you can do it for both work and home. Really challenge yourself on what is required of you and give yourself permission for 10 days that if it doesn't hit that absolutely critical list, which rarely anything does, back off of it for a little bit.
Do I have to force myself in those moments to start like making a change? You know, when people talk about resilience and discipline and they throw those terms around, and it's like, you know, I've been set a task and like in perhaps day 1, day 2 it works, and then day 3,
Yeah.
day 4, day 5 I'm starting to lose interest. Like, and the same with anything in life. I think, you know, myself going to the gym every morning, I talk about it a lot because I still find it like it's a hard thing for me to do. Every morning I'd rather stay in bed. Do you know what I mean? I am forcing myself out of bed every day. But
Yeah.
is it healthy to look at it like that? Is it healthy to look at it as I'm forcing myself to do these things? Because is that going to then, am I making myself hate it in the long run? Because I'm
No.
seeing it like that, like it's a chore.
Yeah. There is an element, and it's not to invite toxic positivity and view the world through, everything's perfect, I'm totally
Yeah.
fine lens. But I do think that there is an element of saying to yourself and going, okay, I'd rather stay in bed right now. That's what my body is telling me. That's the feedback that I'm getting. But how lovely would it be? And these are kind of the words that I was using in the sentiments. How lovely would it be? How exciting would it be? How wonderful would it be if I could just go to the kettle, make the cup of tea, and come back to bed? And I would almost play the tape forward a little bit of, I know that the walk right now to the kitchen, or I can't tell you the number of times I opened my fridge and looked at all the food and I was like, I'm not even going to eat anything because I don't know what I'm going to make. It's too hard to make a decision of like what to even pull out and cook. But I'd have these little exercises with myself where I'm like, let's give it a 2-minute try. Let's just do it, and let's romanticize how we will feel with that cup of tea in hand, back in bed, but now with the cup of tea. And I found that as I effectively coaxed myself and romanticized a bit the process of, let's just get these basic things done. Let's pick out the outfit. We're going to get dressed. I am going to make the food. It's really, really hard the first few times. And I do think that for anyone experiencing incredible amounts of stress, one of the most comforting things is routine. And it's the
Yeah.
knowing that these are low lift activities that if I got nothing else done today, I've met my personal needs. And so my take on it, and I can only speak from my experiences, but yes, I think a little bit of that discipline and going, this might not be the most fun thing, but we're going to get out of bed 5 times this week. And we're going to get a little bit of glimmer. We're going to see that it actually felt good. We're going to prove to ourselves that we can get to the kettle, we can get it done. That builds momentum. The flywheel starts to take. And then actually getting out of bed and going to make your tea in the morning is muscle memory. It's not hard anymore. Now the next challenge might be, okay, well, I'm going to make something that's nutritious and I'm going to start fueling my brain, even if it means I'm cooking for 10 minutes. And I found that building those routines like that actually became such a hug to my nervous system because I knew I could do it. Even if I didn't want to, I had proven to myself enough times over and over through building that discipline muscle.
A hug to my nervous system. I actually love that. I actually love it.
Yeah.
I love how you reframe it. Like even the way you're talking about it, I'm like, that sounds exciting. That sounds
Yeah.
lovely. To romanticize the little moments in my life and to have a moment to pause and appreciate that, I think is such a, it just sounds so fulfilling. I
Hmm.
noticed that you mentioned toxic positivity. I've heard that term few times now. Like, what does it actually mean? What does that mean?
When I think about toxic positivity, I think about the people who kind of skip through life and go, everything's fine, I'm good, I'm great. And there's perhaps a lack of, well, not lack, it's almost, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier of not feeling okay to say that things aren't okay. And
Hmm.
I don't know a single person that hasn't experienced a day of not being okay. It is such a human, normal experience. I would argue it is one of the most normal things a human can go through is to not feel okay. Yet all of us are out here living these lives online, in person, saying that everything's fine. And I think toxic positivity is just, it's a choice to not acknowledge that anything but perfectionism is not okay. And it's a fine line because I really do believe in romanticizing the small moments in your day that just invite those glimmers in, right? It's how lovely that I get to go. I keep coming back to this tea example, but just like romanticize how good and how much you love the mug and how the warm mug in your hand feels incredible and it's cozy to get back into bed with your dog. Like, that's not being toxically positive. That is just a positive experience. But to be experiencing poor mental health or to be in a period where things do not feel good, you feel stuck, you feel a lack of motivation, you're in a rut, and to just make yourself believe everything's fine, I'm good, I don't have to deal with it, and not inviting that self-awareness in, I think that's where people can get really far down the road and go, I've never taken the steps to actually come to peace with it's okay to not feel okay. And as I said, it's the most human thing that we all have, but none of us share it.
We have a sponsor for today's episode, and you've probably heard so much about them already, but it is the Mind Mental Health Charity. And I have recently become a ambassador for Cornwall Mind, which, if you don't know, is my hometown. The things they are doing out there for mental health is so impactful. And the fact that you will all have a local mind near you, a local community that's sharing events and fundraising, but also has the right point of call to help direct you into where you need to go to support your mental health. I know the NHS waiting list is just, it's huge and it's frightening. And if it wasn't for charities like Mind and the people that support those charities, so many people out there wouldn't be able to get the help that they get. So thank you to Cornwall Mind and everyone involved for always, always, always being there. And back to the episode. So take me back to, you change your environment, you leave the workplace. Like, obviously, there's so much that's happened between then and now.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about, tying your self-worth to your job, your career, or your accomplishments. And it's something that is probably going to be the main reason I actually seek a coach, because I struggle as a woman that probably doesn't want to get married or have children, that my sole purpose now is really tied to my career first and foremost. And I,
Mm.
and I, for many years, I loved that. I thought that was very, very normal and healthy. The older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing perhaps tying my purpose to a career isn't, tying my self-worth to my accomplishments isn't. And I can't understand why. And I don't know if I'm wrong. Like, should I just be embracing it? Like we say, should I just romanticize that my love is my job and that's okay? Or am I inevitably going to fall into this burnout pattern? Because work is, work is a funny thing. Work is a super funny thing. And I still don't think I've figured out where I'm going. And so
Yeah.
to tie my whole self-worth to something that feels lost in my life, now my whole self-worth is lost. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It totally makes sense. You know, it's work is such a funny one. There's the career coach side of me that goes, work can be such a fun expression of who you are. It is
Hmm.
a canvas where you get to pour your energy, attention, focus into actualizing ideas and concepts that exist in your head. There's then the side of work that I've experienced that took the life out of me. And I've seen it on both sides. And so this question of identity, I think it's understanding your North Star in life. And that's going to look different for a lot of people. But getting clear before we ever say the word career on, and it's not to say I have to find my life's purpose, but your North Star might just be to be a good person to the people around you, right? If you show up every day, you wake up every day and you're like, my North Star is kindness. My North Star is to put myself in environments where I can exude kindness to the people around me and receive kindness back. I say that because that is my North Star. And work is a channel through which you can actualize that North Star. But I think a lot of us come into careers and go, I don't know what I stand for. I don't know what I care about. I don't have a definition of my value system. And I really believe strongly in when you know your value system, when you kind of have that just personal North Star for how you want to show up in this world, work that doesn't align like with that is always going to rob us of our identity because there's always this like misalignment between who I am and how I'm spending my time. But then let's say you're in a career where you don't perhaps love the output. And I don't believe in dream jobs. I'm very vocal about that. I think there's always aspects of jobs that don't 100% resonate with us. But if you can find yourself in a line of work that puts you in a position to exude kindness, to receive kindness back from others, where you are not fighting against personalities, I think a lot of work can be comforting in that angle. But it comes back to, do you feel like you know what that North Star is for yourself? And it doesn't have to be this grandiose, here's my life passion, what I was put on this world to do. I have to solve all of these problems. But I also don't think that there's anything wrong with you loving and being obsessed with a career if you find it creatively fulfilling. And for so many, careers are identity work. And I'm not against that. I think if you find yourself in an area where you are creating impact that makes you feel good, where you are having fun first and foremost. And I know fun's not a word that many people associate with careers right now, but I think there are ways of working that can bring a lot of fun into the process. I think there's a lot of rhetoric around like, don't let your whole identity be your job. And I subscribe to that. But it's also allowed to be a big part of the pie if you want it to. And I don't think that that needs to be villainized in the way that a lot of social media tells us to just detach from the job. And you just have to define what that pie looks like for you, own that pie, and make peace with that. And if you're like, my career is a big piece of my life, great. If you're like, my career is a very small sliver of my pie, also great. And it doesn't have to be the same for everyone. But I think really getting clear on that North Star first, and then using that as almost like a backsplash to, is this a work environment or is this a type of work that is letting me day in and day out work toward that North Star or incorporate it into my day to day? That's how I think about that.
Do you think Sunday scaries are a telltale sign? Like, because I'm thinking for people that are listening and going, I feel stress. I don't know if I class myself as burnt out, but one thing I know for sure is every time Sunday comes around, I'm starting to dread Monday morning. Like, is that a sign I need to leave my job?
It's not a sign that you need to leave your job, but it's probably a sign that how you're spending 60 to 70% of your energy is no longer resonating with you. I think an interesting thing about careers is, especially for those of us kind of late 20s, early 30s, moving into those mid 30s, is that we select a career path. And in the UK, it's even earlier, right? With A levels at 16, you're already going, this is the course that I am pursuing professionally. And that's what's going to set me. It's such a young age to decide how you're going to allocate your time and energy professionally. But the reality is, we get into these jobs when we're 20, 21, 22. You work at them for a decade. And the job might have resonated when you were young. And now you're a decade older and you've grown. If you think back to the fashion, to what you ate, to who you hung out with, to what interests you had when you were 20 versus now in your 30s, you look back and you're like, what was I wearing? What was I spending my time doing? What music? If you go back and look at photos from yourself, you're like, oh, she was cute, but like, I would never do that. And that's wonderful because it shows that you've grown and you evolved. And we embrace the fact that we have changed our interests, changed who we spend time with, changed how we invest our time, energy, money. Yet the one constant through that entire process, often for most, is our careers. We don't let ourselves change our careers, which are the things that consume arguably the most amount of our time, despite the fact that we as humans have grown and evolved and gone through so many seasons, but we are expecting ourselves for the career to stay on track. So Sunday Scaries are just one somatic response, one somatic signal going, hey, how you're spending your time right now, you don't have to throw it away tomorrow. I'm not saying quit and run away, but it's time to open our eyes and go, why doesn't this work for me anymore? And having that conversation is scary because the second you answer the question means you got to do something about it. Because if we don't do something about it, that itch just gets stronger. The awareness of why something's not working grows and it starts to consume us even more. And that's where that misalignment burnout can come in, when your brain has acknowledged that where you're at right now is no longer right for you. So I'd say Sunday Scaries are actually a gift. And I know that that sounds really bizarre for someone who's experiencing it and perhaps listening to this on a Sunday. It just means when you go to work tomorrow, start taking stock of what's not working, what's out of alignment, what is no longer resonating. And your only due out from there is to go, okay, if I wanted to change one piece of this, what would I change first? And then back yourself to do so.
And so how did you do it then? How did you one, find the courage to break free from that environment that was obviously making you poorly, but two, like, how do you even begin to figure out what's next for you?
Oh, there's so many things. I think a really pivotal moment in this story is when I was really at this kind of rock bottom moment, I called my grandmother, my mom's mom, for guidance. And she is someone who throughout my life, first call, wonderfully wonderful amount of wisdom that she has. And I called her, it was just before Christmas, and she picked up the phone and I kind of jumped right into a full da 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 da. This is what's happening. I didn't even give her a chance to say hi. I probably spoke for 5 minutes straight, and as you can tell, I can be pretty long-winded. And I finished speaking and I took a breath, and her response was, "Who is this?" And I knew my grandmother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She'd been diagnosed about a year and a half prior. This was the first time that she didn't know who I was, and she couldn't remember. And she was young. I mean, she was in her late 70s when this happened. And that moment was very much kind of the fragility of our health crumbled right then and there. I would have been maybe about 25 at the time. I knew that I had so much decision power over my health in that moment. I knew from testing that both my mom and I are predisposed to dementia and to Alzheimer's. And it was this thing where I was like, I'm 25, I don't have to think about this. I don't have to make decisions that influence my health. I'll deal with that when I'm 70, 80 years old. And that phone call with my grandmother was actually the wake-up call that I needed to go, actually, at 25, I have every bit of decision power right here, right now, to change the course of my health, knowing what I'm predisposed to. And that meant, as horrible as I felt in that moment, I pretty much started 180ing all of the ways that I was showing up. And at that point, I'd started implementing things like using the same outfits over and over. I got a meal delivery service, so I didn't have to cook for myself. I'd done things that just made my life operationally easier. But that was the day that I made the decision to stop drinking alcohol. It was that process of removing alcohol just from a mental load and from letting my brain breathe. Like, that's how I describe the process of removing alcohol. Was my brain just felt like it could breathe again. And that drinking was stress. Drinking, whilst it might have felt useful to manage that stress and burnout, it was just putting additional stress load on my body. The clarity over time that emerged from that decision and the energy that came back is what got me back in the gym, got me moving my body. It's what inspired me to take my first course on breath work and learn how to breathe as a nervous system regulation mechanism. And in time, I know it's not like the most perfect answer, but letting my brain breathe in that way showed me so many options that I had in front of me professionally. And it gave me the energy and curiosity back to go, which of those paths that are actually staring at me in the face makes most sense. It allowed me to get curious. And curiosity is probably the biggest thing in retrospect that I acknowledge was absent from that time in my life. And the moment that curiosity comes back in, the moment I had the energy to go talk to the random person at the coffee shop, the moment I had the energy to ask someone at a conference what decision they made to get into the line of work that they're in, it kind of felt like the floodgates opened. And there's lots of ways to invite curiosity back in. It's going to be different for everyone, but it boils down to getting your brain and body to a place where you can be curious again and falling in love with that curiosity and not staring at a computer screen all day going, my next career path has to just emerge on LinkedIn, but actually letting yourself get out into the world and interact at new tables and new spaces that you weren't previously sitting in because you didn't have the energy to do so.
Do you know what? I think that's probably one of the best gifts I've ever had in speaking to people consistently. I speak to like someone new every week. I make it a goal of mine. I set that out because I think we dismiss the power of having brand new conversations with a stranger and what
Mm.
doors that can open up for you, whether that's a physical door and an opportunity or just a door within yourself where you're like, I didn't even think of it like that, or that person is what they do is so exciting, that interests me. Like, there's so many different elements to just having a simple conversation. But I get you. Like, I have been the person that's like, okay, I'm going to scroll endlessly on Indeed on a job search, hoping that the right title will pop up. But I think the problem with
Yeah.
that is I'm automatically falling into my comfort space, which is what I've always done. And so I'm looking for things that I know how to do.
Yeah. And I think one of the other, as I listen to you say that, I think one of the fun ways we're all in that hole, right? There are
Yeah.
days where I'm like, I love my job right now. This is really the first time where I've been able to say that. But I have so many days where I wake up and I'm like, I am deep in that hole of what am I doing? And one of the ways that I love to move through that is if you're familiar with, the whole world of like fantasy writing and world building. And I think that's like a total pivot of conversation, but I think what grasps us so much about like immersing yourself in a different world through literature, through movies, is that it's so different from the reality in which we're in today. And if I'm working with someone and they're like, I just have no clue what could come next, I'm like, okay, there's infinite ways to answer that question. But I want you to, for a week, I want you to world build around a random topic. You could world build around, I'm going to think of random examples now. You could world build around the Korean skincare market. You could world build around crocheting. You could world build around what is happening in the world of AI at the intersection of AI and luxury. Like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You just pick a topic out of a hat and go, okay, I'm just going to be a student for 7 days. I'm going to go learn everything that I can about this. Even if I find it like it's not an obvious career path for myself, I'm just going to exist within this world and immerse myself. And sometimes doing these guided deep dives, literal YouTube rabbit holes, where we normally are like, I'm spiraling through content. I'm like, no, this is intentional. Go learn everything you can about a space, because it's not to say that that's your next job, but it's just to get you excited about, I can immerse myself into an entirely new area, having been a beginner, and I emerge 7 days later so much more of an expert than I was. And it actually just generates this world of learning. And anytime I do a world building exercise with someone, 9 times out of 10, that is not the career path they're going to go follow. But somewhere in that exploration, I'll have them watch a YouTube video. They'll write 100 words being like, oh, what caught my attention was this and this. And then their brain starts going, oh, okay, I talked to someone 2 years ago randomly at an airport who said that, and they told me they worked for this company. Different, but it's made me think of it. What is that person doing right now? Should I reach out to them? And just, there's something about just, and it comes back to maybe changing your environment, like where we started this conversation, pulling yourself so far out of what you know, not looking at LinkedIn and just applying for the jobs that look so familiar and comfortable, but forcing yourself into an area so new. It activates the part of our brain. Our brains want to learn. Our brains feel productive in learning. I just go on, if you need a topic, like open up ChatGPT and just say, give me a random list of 10 different things that are going on in the world right now that have nothing to do with each other. Close your eyes, put your finger on the computer screen, and that's what I want you to go spend 7 days learning about, regardless of how ridiculous it is.
I wanted to ask you on that note, though, when I'm, and I know a lot of this comes down to discipline, there's probably no quick fix to it. One of the things I do at night time is I do put my phone on like do not disturb. So no notifications pop up. So if I, like, it was before I bought a Kindle. So I was reading from my phone Kindle, and I was doing that to avoid the temptation to go and look elsewhere. But I know you actually have a relationship with your phone where you're like, I create, don't consume on my phone. It was one of the things I really remembered from our first conversation. And I'm thinking in that world building example, when you're deep diving into YouTube, there's so many things that are trying to get my attention. I don't need any more distractions. Like, how have you broken through that when you're using your phone day in and day out now?
Yeah. So I think consumption puts us very much in a reactive state, whereas creation very much kind of restores agency. I see so many videos and talk to so many people who are like, the second that I started creating, whether that's writing, whether it's filming their perspectives, whether it's just going to meetups and talking about the worlds in which they exist or that they're learning about, you build a little sense of confidence when you get familiar with your words and comfortable with your words and comfortable with your ideas. But that takes the creation muscle. As I said, consumption is reactive, and passive consumption, there's a lot of research on it in the kind of digital well-being space that shows that it increases anxiety. It generates this need to compare ourselves to other, where on the flip side, that kind of creative output has been shown to improve mood because we are just getting more in touch with our thinking, our points of view. And so to your question on world building, treat it as a very narrow experiment and say, I'm here to learn. I'm here to be a sponge. My intention for using my phone right now, or my intention of opening up these apps, is to only exist within these, like, this narrow world. So if we are world building around Korean skincare, and we're learning everything about the formulation and everything about the marketing and the brands that are up and coming versus the American market or the European market, gamify it. And the second you come across something that doesn't fit that definition, nope, because I'm in research mode right now. I'm here to learn. And having that as the story, the rhetoric that's in the back of the head, you almost like go into little scientist mode. And it gets fun. And as you start learning more. Again, as we said, this might not be the direction professionally that you pursue, but challenge yourself to form a point of view on this. Okay, I've just learned about all of these different skincare products in the Korean market. If I reflect on myself and my skincare needs at the moment, what would I recommend for myself? If I had to make a little shopping cart of the products I've learned about, could I write about that? Could I explain why these might be the products for me? Could I film a video talking about, hey, if you're like me and you're experiencing this, I just spent 72 hours over the last month watching every product review. I know that sounds intensive. I was in an intensive learning state because I just bet on myself to learn everything I could about this industry. Here's what I learned. That process, it does something funny to your attention where you learn to relegate your attention to one specific thing. And it has massively improved my relationship with my phone, with social media, where I'm very much now in that create, don't consume mindset, because I'm going, I'm only here to learn about this thing, or I'm only here to talk about this thing. If I open up my feeds and all of these apps are now, it's not even social media anymore. It's attention media. It's interest media. You are being shown back content that aligns with your interests, and your interests are formed by what you're searching on, what you're liking. My algorithms are to a point where the only content I see is now from other people in the career space, because the only thing I do is talk about careers all day long on these apps. I literally do not engage with other topics. And so my feed is sending me back what I'm creating. If you are getting a wide gamut of information of topics that are sent back to you, that's a signal that if you want to be more intentional with your social media usage, go down, understand these are the things that I want to learn right now, and tell that to the algorithm. And over time, you will notice that it starts kind of blocking out other topics. They are reactive algorithms to what interests you're putting in. So that's all across the board on kind of social media, the create, don't consume. But these are incredible tools. We have never been in a world where there's so much access to information. And I do believe if we are using it for an educational purpose, run at it. Because how cool
Yeah.
to exist at a time where we can learn from other people with just the sheer amount of information that exists right now.
Yeah. 1,000%. Big fan of social media. So, I mean, there's a lot of hate on social media at the moment, and I'm hoping that, just this conversation alone, we are part of the cog that's working towards making social media a healthier and more safe place for people versus this toxic realm of how it's so perceived. But I think a lot of that does come down to your own responsibility of how you use it. And that's your own discipline and your own wants, needs, and desires. And like you say, how you charge at the algorithm for it. When you're talking about this task, though, we spoke about it a little bit, is this where I create a mission versus a goal?
Yeah,
Can you explain that one?
totally. So mission versus goal. I think when we get to New Year's and we always think about those New Year's goals or those New Year's resolutions, they're brittle, right? How many of those
Mm.
goals have we set where we're like, this is the goal. I'm going to do it every day. I'm going to build consistency around it. A goal is often outcome focused and it's ego driven. And it's something where we're like, I'm going to get this done because I just have to prove that I can do it. A mission is less guided. A mission doesn't actually necessarily have an outcome. A mission is something that is more, I want to become a student of X, or I am going to back myself to step into the world of Y. A goal is I'm going to go to the gym 30 times before March. And if you do not hit that goal of 30, your ego goes, oh, I didn't hit 30 times. That's really upsetting. And then you're never going to go again. A mission's adaptable. And if your mission for this year is, I'm going to get greater clarity on my next career step, that's an example of a mission versus I'm going to apply for 22 jobs by the end of the month. That's a goal. There's so many different ways that you can actualize and realize that mission. Whereas if you do not hit 22 applications, you have failed at that goal. And it maybe suggests that we need to create more open-ended goals. But I really like when you set that mission out and you just go, It's going to give you a North Star. I'm working toward this. There's no end goal. It's just, I'm now a person who does this. It's not a goal. It's a part of my fiber. It's a part of my being. I'm someone who this year is investing in designing my next career step. I could come up with 100 different ways for you of how you could make that statement true. So that's kind of the difference. And again, if you're having trouble differentiating between a goal and a mission, if you can measure it, it's probably a goal. If you are struggling to measure it and it seems more like a open-ended path, that's more a mission. Write what that mission is, put it somewhere visible, and ask yourself every day when you wake up and you see that Post-it note and you're like, what's something I can do today that takes me closer to that mission or that falls under the umbrella of that mission? That's kind of the core difference between the two of them.
I've got like so much to be working on. I feel like I've got my own homework. I
Love it.
I'm actually going to start doing that world building exercise. And I was thinking in my mind, and it's hilarious, but I'm going to as part of my weekly exercise and task, I want to be able to like make a presentation for my partner and tell him what I've learned, and we'll go through it because me and him and I, we love having like really in-depth conversations about the world, but he teaches me so much that I'm like,
Yeah.
right, okay, let's see what I can bring to the table and hopefully like wow him. And he's gonna be like, what? And that's the most exciting thing about it is I love learning, I love being a sponge, and there's nothing more fulfilling than feeling like every new conversation you walk into, you bring something to it, and learning all the time is like, it's the most underrated skill that we have. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to help me uncover a lot about myself. I've loved every minute of this conversation. Is there anything else we can leave the audience with today? I don't know if you have a book recommendation or a piece of advice. Like I
Oh,
know you've shared so many tools.
yeah. I think just like one final comment on what you were saying there, and I'm so excited to see what you world build around, and you're gonna have to tell me as soon as you hone in on that thing. It's that I think as we get older, we don't feel like we can be students anymore. We have this
Uh-huh.
pressure of going, oh, well, I'm this age now. I have to have it figured out. And learning is something that you do when you're in school, and I'm not in school
Yeah.
anymore. And learning is really, really fun. And again, it's learning for the sake of being a student, not necessarily learning for the sake of, I have to pursue this thing. I'm going to be world building around furniture flipping when I get back to London. I've just decided on it. I've already started my rabbit holes of what does it mean to go from Facebook Marketplace to something that I'm really excited to put in my living room. And it's an area where I simply just want to learn what that process is. And candidly, when I had that conversation with myself recently, I'd realized it had been a really long time since I'd learned something. Like it had been
Mm.
months since I'd learned something. And I'm someone who talks about all of this all day long. So it's just a welcome that concept of learning back into your life for nothing else than the pure joy of it. I think a book that encapsulates that concept really well is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And it is a book that I read every January. This is the 7th January that I have read it. I'm about to finish it. And it's really about a book of Michael and his story of just what it meant for him to surrender to the kinds of decisions that he was faced with as he was building his company. And it is a book that every year I continue to exist on this earth and I live through 12 months and I come back to it, I see the story differently. It's the only book that I routinely read over and over. But I think the really incredible takeaway is that when a path is unclear, learning to be patient and practicing patience never leads us astray. I think we want answers quick. We want answers fast. And if you are committed to moving forward, practicing patience, letting the world tell you a bit what needs to happen, because often we already know the answer. We just have to be aware and looking for the signal that to choose that path or to make that decision. It's just the book encapsulates all of that really well. So I recommend everyone to read it.
Mm. I wonder as well if we practice what we preach a little bit, like listening to you say, I haven't done any learning for 4 months, but it's what you teach others. And it's, we are the first people to give the best advice, but we wouldn't take it ourselves. And so I think a lot of this is almost sitting and looking in the mirror and saying, like, if someone else came to you right now saying, I'm lost, I'm burnt out, I don't know what to do, what would your advice be to them? And then perhaps think, maybe I should take a little bit of that for myself.
Yeah.
There was one thing as well I wanted to mention because I signed up to it this morning. Haven't used it yet, but really excited about it. I went on your TikTok and saw that you made like an AI tool that helps you like
Yeah.
with some questions about helping you choose your next career steps. So I'm going to pop that in the link in the description as well for people in case they want to give it a go.
Incredible. That we have
Mm.
so much information in our heads that I I love using AI to
Yeah.
recognize patterns that we are saying out loud. We are having these conversations. We're texting our friends about these things, but we might not be putting two and two together.
Mm.
Um, and how incredible now that we have technology that can effectively read between the lines of our words and say, hey, this is a pattern that keeps coming up. And maybe we should think about it this way when it comes to your career. So you'll have to
Mm.
let me know when you use it, what you uncover.
Yeah, we're gonna stay in close contact for sure though, lovely.
Amazing.
It's my year of finding the right coach. So I'm yeah, this conversation has been absolutely wonderful. I cannot believe how quickly time has flown by and there's still so much I wanted to ask you. So perhaps we'll look at having you back on once you're settled in the UK again and we'll see where this year takes you. But thanks so much for your time, lovely.
Thanks so much for having me.